The main objective of nationalism was actually to fight against the evils of colonialism. I'm going to show to you in this particular lesson how you can be able to interpret and effectively answer questions under nationalism. Most importantly, I'm really going to make it very simple for you to easily understand. Now, let's go. So, how do we define nationalism? Nationalism can be defined as the awareness, the consciousness of the Africans to gain their political, economic, and social control. In simple words, we can also define nationalism as the desire of a group of people to gain their political, economic, and social freedom. In the context of African history, the main objective of nationalism was actually to fight against the evils, of colonialism, such as high tax, forced labor, which were generally imposed by the colonial masters. So many Africans were not happy about this, so they had to criticize openly, and this is how nationalism was intensified. Now, there is an important factor that you need to take note here. Nationalism actually started before 1945, but the problem was that it was not highly manifested. It was not manifested by a large group of people like in 1945. That is why it was only after 1945 that many people in Africa started manifesting signs of nationalism. And the next thing you need to know is that why was it only by 1945 that nationalism was getting popular in most African countries? Why was it only after 1945? If you are a history student, you probably need to understand that 1945 was the end of the Second World War. And after the Second World War, many European powers, they had to abandon their African territories. Some European colonies were defeated in Africa, so they had to leave. It was from this particular moment that the history of Africa was going to take a new stage. We are now going to look the internal and the external factors which favored the rise of nationalism across Africa. One of the internal factors which influenced the rise of nationalism, we are going to see the rise of Western educated elites like Kwame Nkrumah. These are actually people who came back to Africa after studying abroad. They came back to Africa in order to influence the Africa to gain their empowerment and fight for their freedom. Also, the creation of pressure groups, political parties, and trade unions, which actually had to criticize. The objective of these pressure groups was actually to criticize the colonial policies, which were considered to be harsh and did not respect the traditions and culture of the indigenous. Another factor was that the harsh colonial policies, which were imposed by the colonial masters on most African countries, were considered to be something which is very bad. Remember, an example was the policy of assimilation, which completely disrespected the role played by the traditional rulers. And it was only after the Second World War that many Africans could no more tolerate this. Now, talking about the external factor, we are now going to look at the external factors. One of the external factors was the outcome of the Second World War. During the Second World War, most Africans were forcefully recruited. They were deported to Europe to fight as soldiers in favor of their colonial masters. When these Africans were recruited, they went to Europe. They realized that it was not so developed as they thought. During the battlefield, they realized that they were more resistant. So, realizing this, when they came back to Africa,